Now, the United States is ramping up military aid to Israel, and Israel will in turn spend that money on weapons and equipment from the US companies. It's a money merry-go-round that will certainly end up helping the US defense firms, which already benefit from the fact that the US is the biggest military spender in the world. It forked out just under $600 billion on defense last year. Now, the industry itself employs around 3.5 million non-military workers, with wages estimated at about $40 billion a year. Foreign military aid is a big earner. The latest agreement with Israel is worth about $38 billion over the next 10 years. Let's look at this more closely now with Craig Copetas, our editor-at-large. Craig, a cynic might say this is essentially a massive gift from the US government, Washington if you like, to the American military and defense firms. Is it?
You don't have to be a cynic. What you're seeing here is the industry of defense becoming offensive and dangerous to mankind. And to understand this in context, we need to go back to 1961 and listen to President Dwight David Eisenhower, the general who defeated the Nazis during World War II. Take a look.
Stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The military-industrial complex. There you heard it from President Eisenhower. It's a dangerous concept because it's like the worm of Ouroboros. It just keeps consuming itself. There's so much money goes into the defense industry. And in this instance, with this deal with Israel, Congress has cut a special deal that ensures that this money, this $38 billion over the next 10 years, is only spent on U.S. weapon systems. They can't use any of that money to buy anything that's not American.
And tell us about the links between Washington and the U.S. defense industry.
Well, it's been a revolving door since the founding of the country, and to be sure, it's the same with most countries. We've seen some very egregious examples of this during the Bush years, where we had Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, their association with firms like Bechtel, a lot of the sutlering firms.
Sutlering, just explain that expression.
An old term. Sutlering is the industry of camp followers. It goes back centuries. These were like the quartermasters. These were private companies that followed armies around the world, providing everything from shoes to weapons. And it's turned in Halliburton. The company Halliburton is the best example of this. But this is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
And it affects even conflicts today like Syria. Just explain very briefly.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Matthew, here's how it works. If you build new weapons, what happens to the old ones? Well, it's like a used car. It goes onto a secondary market, and they're sold to these mini conflicts around the world, which end up major conflicts like what's going on in Syria. That weaponry there had to come from somewhere. And if you look closely at it, you'll see that it's coming from decommissioned stockpiles.
Okay, Craig Copetas, thank you very much for your analysis.